Packers play the Eagles on Sunday. Tausch shared with us earlier in the week his X positivity score. Elon broke down with Grok his positivity. He's a bit of a homer. I don't know if you've heard. And then when I asked him on a scale of 1 to 100 what his positivity is about the Packers beating the Eagles on Sunday, he not so politely refused to use the 1 to 100 scale. What are we doing here? And I quote. So he used the 1 to 10 scale and said he's a 5, which I'm no mathematician, but that would seem to be a 50 if you did 1 to 100. So I ask you, oh wise one, where is your positivity on a scale of 1 to 100 that the Packers will beat the Eagles on Sunday?
Yeah, 1 to 100, I would be. Is this assuming Hurts plays? Right? Is this assuming?
Yeah,
I think we expect them to play. Yes.
Okay, so this is assuming Hurts plays. I'm probably at 50 to 55% is where I'm at. That Green Bay wins. It's because I never like to be at under 50% that a team can win. Like I'm not comfortable saying that they have an under 50% chance of winning because I think
I was at
this team
43.
Yeah, like I think the team can play well enough to win. So 43, I mean, you're not too far off. I mean 43 is not terrible. But I just think they have enough that they can go and win. I understand that they haven't in these, big games against good NFC teams finished the deal at the end of the games. I understand that. But that doesn't mean they can't in this game. But it's going to take a certain effort that we haven't seen yet. And that's why I'm not at like 65 or 70%, and I'm just above 50 or at 50 because it needs to be shown. And it's going to be a tall task against Philly.
Tausch, can we get you up to 55
listen,
on a scale of 1 to 100?
I think at this point where Green Bay's at, it's a coin toss. And Green Bay needs to finish games better. And, Brian, what are the big things that you see that don't give you more confidence?
Well, I mean, I think in these bigger games, so to speak, again, you're looking at against these higher echelon teams is how they start, right? Like you get into these games and you dig yourself a hole right off the get in the first quarter, and it's hard to recover. Like how you start these first quarters of these games is kind of a big deal. And you look at how they've done that through against Detroit in the first two and in Minnesota. I mean, you turn the ball over, you go 3-and-out, or in Minnesota, the first game you're down 28-7 at half or whatever it was. Like, you're not recovering from that. That's just really hard to come back from. And even Minnesota too, right? In Minnesota, they were down whatever it was. Like, it's hard to come back from those things. And first drive against Minnesota with the turnover, like you got momentum going, then you give it away, and it's hard to get that thing back when you're on the road. So like, I look at what happens in that first quarter of the game. If they're able to control Philly in the first quarter of the game, and they can put touchdowns on the board to start, like that's a big step forward for them because they haven't been able to do it. And like, if we see that sign early in the game, like that could be a change that we, haven't seen from them. And that's something. And the end of the game, like we could all talk about, the defense hasn't been able to stop or this or that, but like a lot of those questions can get answered if they take care of business at the beginning of the game, right? Like you look at things differently if you score that extra 10 points at the start of the game and how the game looks at the end. So like we could say what if or that, but like, you don't get yourself in those positions in the fourth quarter if you do what you need to do at the beginning. So I want to see what happens within the first 30, not 30 minutes, but the first 15 minutes of the game. I want to see how they come out And if that looks positive, then yeah, I'll feel a lot better about their chances as that game rolls on.
Brian, would you take the ball again? LaFleur he takes that pill now. He doesn't defer. Would you just say, for me, this game, your defense is playing better than your offense is right now, in my opinion. Jalen Hurts is rusty. I think I would much prefer putting them out there first, trying to get a stop, and then building it that way, kind of going back to the old school analytics of trying to get that middle part of the game, that middle 8, where you can go get it. I think that's a part of this too, because when you take the ball, you're putting a lot of pressure on your offense. Saying, all right, we got to set the tone for the game, and when you don't, it reverberates through, especially early in football games.
Yep. If I'm him and you win that coin toss, I'm sending the defense out there first. You're right. Hurts. Regardless of how big of a leader he is and how talented he is and what he does for their football team. I mean, he hasn't played in a while, right? And he's been in the protocol, and I don't know what he's been doing, if he's been at practice like Dobbs was when he was a full participant. I don't know what he's been doing, right? I guess it doesn't matter, but he hasn't been playing games, right? I mean, he played, a series or two against Washington, and he hasn't been back since. So you're going to want him to be out there and test him. Let's see what he can do. Let's see how he's playing. And what you get out of that, too, is you get to see right away when Philly walks out in the field, if they get the ball right away, what they're going to try to do to you right away, right? When you take the ball on offense first, right? And I always thought this way, too, when we were with McCarthy or even with LaFleur, you take the ball first and say you even go down and score, right? And you show that other coach what type of offensive game you want to play. You allow them to kind of counter and how they're going to play you, right? Like you allow them to kind of, all right, so they're going to throw the ball up and down the field, or they're going to run it and they're going to throw. So we want to try to counter it with this way. You're going to allow Philly's going to show you what they're going to want to do. We can assume they're going to try to ground and pound and run it with Saquon, which they probably will. But you're going to get Philly to show you what they want to do. And LaFleur and this defense, that's what you want to see. Are you just going to try to give Saquon the ball 30 times and kind of leave Hurts out of this thing? Okay, let's see it. If that's the game we're going to do, let's see it. Let's see it play out. And that's it. Let's get a stop. Let's get in the field. Let's get a stop. Let's get the ball back. Let's quiet down the link. Let's get this thing quiet, just like they did in Seattle. Like, you got to have that approach. Like you did in Seattle, quiet the building down and get the guys settled into the game so that, things can go a little bit smoother, because it's going to be rowdy there. It is going to be rowdy. I can assure you that.
And what Mike McCarthy did was he would pick his spots of when he would do that, right? If we're comparing their approaches. And Matt LaFleur has done it extensively this season. And the one that didn't make any sense to me the most was Sunday, when you're playing an offense that is scuffling, that has a rookie quarterback. Give them the ball, get them 3 and out. Because look, if you look at what they did offensively, the Bears had a 7-3 lead and had -4 net yards of offense. So you probably would have gotten them 3 and out if you'd have kicked it away. So to your point, when you guys went into Seattle and won and he took the ball, or I can't remember which game it was, where he wanted to steal a possession and he did the surprise onside kick, which you obviously can't do anymore. And it worked, right? Those were things that not only were calculated because you were thinking about the type of game you were in, they also, when they worked, when you went down and scored or when you got the ball on the onside kick, I mean, the energy that created on your sideline was through the roof. And it quieted the other sideline and the fans that were there, to your point. So I agree with you. I'm very curious to see if he ends up agreeing with you. Are you due for another visit to practice? Like maybe give the pep talk to the offensive line, maybe, elbow him in the ribs a little bit and say, hey, man, I'm telling you, I played in Philly. Kick it away. Get that defense out there. Get a stop.
Yeah, no, I didn't get the call to come back to Green Bay for practice this week. I didn't get the invite. It's okay.
Saving you for the NFC Championship game weekend.
Yeah, I'm with them in spirit. It's listen. This is. We could talk about what they should do to start the game. I just unfortunately think that whether or not he takes the ball, if they win the coin toss, whatever, like it's it's going to come down to.
It's not going to win the game.
Like,
I get it.
Yeah. Like there's going to be pivotal moments throughout the game, as there always is in playoff games. Like there's always decisive moments within a playoff game because normally, good teams. Obviously there's always certain playoff games that end up getting out of hand. There's always certain teams that don't belong and games get out of hand, kind of like the way we saw Green Bay and Dallas last year. Those games happen. But normally when you get into these types of games, there are good teams against good teams, and there's pivotal moments throughout games that decide these things. And I kind of see this game going that way with Green Bay and Philly. I think Green Bay's a good team. I really do. And they've played good teams really well, right? Like, I mean, I understand the way the first Minnesota game went, but they clawed their way back. They fought their way back into that game, regardless of what you say, how Minnesota played it, right? Like, Minnesota didn't want them to get back into the game. They didn't want to make it a one-score game. Like, they didn't look for that. But Green Bay fought their way back into it, and that's the way all the Detroit – I mean, maybe not the first Detroit game, but the other Detroit game, the other Minnesota game, they were tight ball games. So, like, I expect Green Bay to play it very similarly in this Philly game. So, like, it's going to come down to decisive moments, and can Green Bay win those decisive moments? And they haven't been able to do it up to this point, right, against, the Detroits and the Phillies and the Minnesotas. Can they do it this weekend? And that's going to be the deciding factor, and who's going to step up and do it now that, Watson's not there. You don't have that threat. Who's going to be the guy? And that will be the thing that everyone's intrigued to see.
All right, Bryan, I have some other questions for you, including one that I want to bounce off of you before I ask Matt LaFleur later today. We will get to that coming up, plus a little tackle talk and where this offensive line is. Tausch mentioned it earlier. This is a defense that is playing extremely well right now for the Philadelphia Eagles. How is the offensive line going to handle that? And then a little bit of our discussion from earlier in the week about regression or not as much progression as you expected from quarterback Jordan Love. We'll ask Bryan about that as well. That's all still ahead. Bryan Bulaga on Wilde and Tauscher.